president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana, and we're so happy to be presenting the first of a series of 3 boot camps, starting with the Retool, following with the Recover, and ending with the Restore. And we hope all of you will join us for all 3 of them. We have an amazing lineup of speakers and all experts in the different fields. And starting today, I'd like to welcome everyone, and particularly our speakers, for accepting this invitation. For HCCL, it is a priority to focus efforts in providing our micro and small business owners with the tools and resources needed to overcome the impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. For business leaders, the actions they take now and in the weeks and months ahead will define them and their companies. While the impact of the crisis varies across industries and regions, it's no exaggeration to recognize that as a backbone of the economy, attention to the small business ecosystem is critical. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our expert speakers for today's bootcamp on retooling your business. We are very proud of our partnership with the New Orleans Business Alliance, which allows us to leverage many resources to the Hispanic business community. So without any further ado, I'd like to start with introducing Ms. Lynette White-Collin, Vice President, Small Business Growth with the New Orleans Business Alliance. Ms. White-Collin is the Vice President of Small Business Growth at the New Orleans Business Alliance, a public-private partnership with the City of New Orleans, which delivers economic development for the city. Lynette develops and implements strategies towards alleviating barriers to growth for business owners of color. Ms. White-Collin leads Invest NOLA, a small business growth accelerator focused on scaling high growth potential businesses owned by ethnic minorities. Additionally, she manages relationships within the community of local private sector corporations, anchor institutions, and public agencies, fostering development of procurement and contract opportunities for businesses of color. Lynette holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of New Orleans. She was awarded a Certified Credit Union Executive Certificate at the Community Development Credit Union Institute at Southern New Hampshire University. Lynette sits on many boards throughout the city, and really it's an honor to work with her and her vast experience. And then of course we have Alejandra Guzman Barraza, which I like to call her one of our own because she's also one of our active board members for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. Alejandra is an expert in social responsibility, community development, and new business development. She has developed her work experience mostly in the private sector, where her main focus has been to create and analyze intersectoral partnership programs, combining non-government organizations, government agencies, and private sector companies focused on solving community and economic development challenges in Mexico and abroad. In 2016, she began targeting her efforts to the 350,000+ members of the greater New Orleans community, whom she serves daily through the New Orleans Business Alliance. Alejandra remains connected to the Latin community via the Hispanic Chamber, as I mentioned, and also by writing a monthly column at Viva NOLA magazine, which is a New Orleans online and printed bilingual magazine. She has graduated with honors from ITESM as an organizational psychologist and has postgraduate studies in corporate social responsibility and a master in business administration from the A.B. Freeman School of Business at Tulane. She is an active member of many strategic organizations such as HCCL, the Urban Land Institute, and she's also the board chair for Fund 17, an organization helping micro entrepreneurs in New Orleans. Alejandra is currently based in New Orleans and serves as Vice President of Performance Management and Strategy at the New Orleans Business Alliance. So without any further ado, Lynette and Alejandra, I'd like to welcome you, and maybe you'd like to share something that we have not in the bio to start off our conversation today.
You want to start, Lynette?
You go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to commend the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce because this is a conversation much needed in our community. We are going to present a couple of concepts of business, but also we're going to be very practical and offer very specific tools that are now available for the community. So thank you, Myra, for inviting us. We also highly appreciate the partnership with the Hispanic Chamber, and we hope, actually, we trust that what we present today will be very helpful for our businesses. So thank you again, Myra, for inviting us.
Yeah, ditto. Thank you, Myra. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, and this is something I haven't done in a very long time. So some of you I see in the audience here that, I know, but welcome and thank you again for being here. So as Myra pointed out, we run a program at the Business Alliance called the InvestNOLA. And InvestNOLA came about because as we looked at what was happening in our local small business ecosystem here, we have a plethora of resources, a number of ESOs who serve everything from mentoring to technical assistance to lending and finance and funding. But what we found was missing. Most of those organizations are serving startups and early stage businesses. So what we found, though, that there are many existing businesses, some of them who've managed to get themselves to later growth stage, and then they're stuck. And we did not have the resources in our local ecosystem to really respond to the needs of those businesses. But what we knew was that those are the types of businesses that are hovering around $1 million in annual revenue that really had the potential to accelerate scale, to create jobs for new residents. And so that's where we wanted to, focus our efforts. So while we have, a number of organizations that can help early stage businesses, help the startups, that's where we decided to focus. So that's what the program is around InvestNOLA. And so what we address is their need for management education. And that's some very high level, more advanced level education where we've partnered with Tulane and Xavier universities. They've developed a very high level executive education program. So, we're introducing new strategies to businesses on how they can grow. So it's not just about, how do I get, a few more customers. We're introducing strategies like mergers and acquisitions, right? That you could buy another whole company, right? And so rather than focus on trying to bring in a few more customers, you can bring in a whole body of customers, right? Yeah, so just introducing those types of strategies, doing joint ventures and teaming agreements, working with other businesses. So just introducing new strategies for growth and not just kind of the same stuff that they've been getting from, most of the ESOs. So we also brought in a table of procurement officers, folks who are working in procurement, facilities management, supplier diversity. And so we challenged all of them to work with us and to work together to be able to strategize around increasing their spend with local businesses of color. And so we've been working with them now for the better part of 2 years, and I'll say it's been fairly successful that we've been able to get a number of private sector companies to the table, and that has, certainly helped. So our approach was to get management, advanced level management education, but also connect these businesses to contract opportunities in the private and public sector. And then finally, we pulled together 3 of the local CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, and they are now collaborating And we're building a $10 million fund, of which we've already raised $1.5 million just that will serve as a loan loss reserve. That leverages us being able to raise this $10 million fund. I'm probably announcing something that I haven't announced to anybody else yet, but we actually have our first tranche of funding in the fund now. And we've created a product that's actually a patient financing product. So it works where the business may need a $500,000 loan, right? And we know that most businesses of color, if you went to the bank, chances are you're not going to get a $500,000 loan. You might get a $75,000 line of credit, right? Which is really not going to help you to amass a real growth strategy. So in the management training classes, each business owner is tasked with having to develop a growth strategy. They have to identify a growth strategy, write up the strategy so that there's an implementable plan at the end of it. And this strategy is really to get them from that $1 million in annual revenue to 10 million within 3 to 5 years, right? And so our CDFIs have banded together to do this product, this patient product. So if they get this $500,000 loan, the repayment of that loan is tied to benchmarks in their growth strategy. So that might look like a business, gets the loan, and in the growth strategy, it says that it's going to take me 1.5 years before I really can, amass any profit, from this strategy, because I've got to hire people, I've got to get new equipment, I've got to be connected to these contracts, and it's going to take me a while. So rather than burden that business at the onset and next month they're straddled with a big fat loan payment, we're telling them, do what you need to do, and in 18 months, we're going to come back and figure out, how we can make this work for you. It could be a monthly payment, it could be an interest-only payment, it could be a quarterly structure, but we wanted to make it patient so that, we don't burden the business, but also make sure that the businesses have enough money to really amass a good, strategic growth plan. So that's pretty much what we've been doing. Is, Myra alluded to, I've worked with the Urban League, ran a women's business center there. I opened a contractor center, so worked with a number of businesses in the city, doing technical assistance, helping them to gain access to capital and to contracts and to grow their businesses. So Myra asked that we come here to talk to you guys about, maybe retooling your business in the environment of COVID. So that's really what we wanted to talk about tonight. But that's
wonderful.
That's my spiel.
And that's exactly what we want to hear, because those are the opportunities and the little saving tools that we're expecting, and that businesses maybe are not aware of right now, and that they need to implement in order to get out of this COVID environment right now that everybody. Mm-hmm. So particularly if you've been impacted by COVID, and who hasn't, we need to learn about those opportunities and then follow through with implementation. So with that, I know that you've prepared a wonderful presentation. Do we start with Alejandra, or do we start with yours? Which one?
We can do either. Alejandra, what's your pleasure?
I can start. Mine is going to be a little bit shorter, and it includes some additional context and who we are. So perhaps that could be helpful as an intro to yours, Lynette. So I am going to share my screen. So as Lynette said, we do have a suite of tools available for the business community. In this presentation, I will give a little bit of more context of who the Business Alliance is, and some tools available particularly to businesses in our community, and include a couple of contexts of what's happening in our environment that I think it's important for us to use as a reflection on how we can leverage what we know and what we don't know. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So the content of this presentation, again, I'll give you a little bit of more context of who we are, context on how we are evaluating the current environment. There's a lot of unknowns in this environment, unfortunately, but the good news, I think, is that there's things that we do know, and we think that we need to focus on those things to create our game plan, our business game plan. Finally, I'm going to present some of the tools available. This is not inclusive of what Lynette has. Lynette has a much wider set of tools that are available for businesses. And then I'm going to end with something that I've found to be very useful in what the work that I'm doing with the Business Alliance, particularly in real estate. And I call it the power of data analytics. It has changed the way we do our business development pitch tremendously. And a good piece of news is that we have the ability at the Business Alliance to share this type of tools with the broader business community. So this is something that I think will be a part of the content that you will enjoy. So to start, the Business Alliance is a public-private partnership with the City of New Orleans. We focus on economic development in Orleans Parish. And we essentially divided our work in 4 areas. And the reason we do this is because we believe in a holistic approach to economic development. We cannot do well in attracting businesses if we don't have a good local and prepared talent workforce. And we cannot retain our workforce if we don't have thriving communities. And of course, we have focused a lot of our work in the small business community because, and Lynette will be able to give us a better number, but I think it's 70% of our business community, if not more, is small businesses. So we recognize that that is a focus that we need to focus on. So this is who we are. And as far as navigating the current environment, I would like to analyze things in these 3 areas. Because ultimately, real estate decisions have always been influenced by what's happening in the public sector, what is happening in the private sector, and most especially now with COVID, what's happening in the consumer behavior. And I think this is true for every industry, but right now I'm bringing the real estate industry as an example. So to give you an example, what's happening in the public sector, there's a lot of unknowns. We still don't know who the president will be, although we could have some idea. But it's continued to be an unknown. And, there is polarizing views on who should be the president, and that has created a lot of uncertainty and put a pause on a lot of investments. But again, focusing on what we do know, there are still a lot of federal programs that will continue that could be helpful for our businesses. A good example of this is opportunity zones, and I'll bring an example of how we can leverage this in a minute. For those of you who are not familiar with opportunity zones, this is a program that was established to channel capital gains for businesses to investment opportunities in distressed areas. So a couple of years ago, each governor of each state determined which areas would be considered as an opportunity zone within each state. New Orleans has a couple of them, and there's an opportunity to attract investment to our businesses. So this is a program that continues and will continue for the rest of the year. And by that, I mean that there's an opportunity to make those investments until the end of this year, which was a period that was extended. Originally, I believe it was July or the end of the summer. For the private sector, unfortunately, and Myra mentioned this, there's a lot of businesses that are going to close because of COVID and are in need of cash. So I'll present that program that we've developed for this purpose, and hopefully we can help businesses that are in this situation. And another area of interest and what's happening in the private sector is that following the killing of George Floyd, there's been an emerging narrative of the importance of diversity and inclusion. A lot of corporations have opened up their eyes to this topic and have pledged a good amount of money to support diversity and inclusion initiatives. A good example of this is Bank of America, who has pledged $1 billion for this type of initiatives. there are others. For instance, they've established Juneteenth as a corporate holiday, and there's others that have established a budget to support diversity and inclusion initiatives. From an investment perspective, what we've noticed is that there's an increased interest on investing in minority-owned businesses. So the good news for us is that one, that there's interest in saving businesses that have been affected by COVID, and two, there is an increased interest of investing in businesses that have some sort of social impact and minority ownership. So again, we've created programs to leverage these two scenarios. As far as consumer behavior, this is I'm presenting here a survey that's showing us what I laugh at what we already know. Half of us are avoiding leaving our homes. Half of us are working from home partially, entirely. We're avoiding public transportation and practicing social distance. And what's happening right now and what's worrying from a business perspective is that our consumers are in limbo. They're changing their habits, and ultimately they could have a change in priorities that have a long-lasting effect. So the only thing that we could do at this point is monitor their behavior. And for this, again, when I mentioned the power of data analytics, we do have a tool that can help us monitor consumer behavior in real time, and that can be offered to our business community. And I'll talk about that in a second. So going to a more practical conversation, based on this context, there's a number of tools and events that are available for our community that we think can help businesses navigate through the current environment. Going back to opportunity zones, we have created a community OC ready workshop, and it's intended to provide resources and information around opportunity zones. And we have made it very intentional to offer this workshop to members of our community that typically will not get this information. We make it very practical. We bring information, but also case studies, and also bring the context that you would need ultimately to leverage this tool. I am not going to show the video that I have here, but this is a testimony of a participant from one of our previous workshops, and part of his testimony was that the workshops that we put together are very easy to understand. They provide information that is not only conceptual. If any of you have participated in Opportunity Zone workshops, something that has happened is that they just talk about the concept, but they don't help businesses really understand how we can leverage it. So we did something different. We brought, like I said, experts in the field that could help you really understand what you need and what steps you need to take to actually leverage this program. So when I share the presentation, feel free to look at the video and hear what one of our participants had to say about this. Oh, actually, I do have the video. Could you hear it well? Lynette, can you give me a thumbs up if it's here, you can hear it?
Yes. Lynette is on mute.
I actually can't hear it, Alejandra.
Oh, okay. So I'm just gonna, okay, so I'll just share the presentation, Myra, and feel free to share with participants so they can go over the video.
Yes, we will be sharing everything with
Okay.
the registered after.
Great. So part of another event that we'll be having, actually, this is taking place next week, is quarterly real estate breakfast. Every quarter, we host a real estate breakfast with the Urban Land Institute. And next event is going to focus on the state of the real estate industry at a national, state, and local level. Now, even if you're not involved directly with the real estate industry, I think this information is important because ultimately what's happening in real estate is very reflective of what's happening in other industries. So if businesses are downsizing, it will be reflected on the commercial real estate part. If consumers have not had gained consumer confidence, we're going to see a lot of shops closing up and so on. So I encourage you to attend. And the reason I think this is valuable in this environment is because it's important to just stay in touch with industry leaders so they can give us, their pulse on what's going on in this environment. Speakers are representing CoStar and STR. CoStar is a real estate database industry that that provide really good information about like vacancies in the real estate world, and STR focuses on information around the hospitality industry. So, New Orleans being a hospitality town, I'm very much looking forward to what STR has to say. So this is available to the public. It has no cost. And again, I think that staying in touch with industry leaders is really important during those times. And for the hospitality industry, and following up the idea that a lot of businesses, unfortunately, will have to close shop because of the COVID crisis, we are in the midst of launching a hospitality relief fund that is intended to support businesses, as I said, that have been affected by this crisis. Businesses will be able to obtain investments from other investors interested in supporting those businesses. And the unique characteristic of this is that it's going to be patient capital. So the money we raise to support these businesses it's going to have, I'll back up a little bit. Investors that will participate in this fund will understand that they're not going to gain control of those businesses. That the intention really is to support businesses that want to continue to operate, gain some cash without having to give up their ownership completely. Our general partner does a much better job of explaining the details of this fund, and we are going to have a presentation actually tomorrow for businesses at 2:30 p.m. So if you're interested, just drop your email in the chat box, and I'll make sure to send you more information. But ultimately, what you need to know right now is that this is a fund for the hospitality businesses, particularly hotels and restaurants that are in need of cash to continue their operations. They will not lose control of their business. This is not a loan, but they will have to share ownership. And now going back to the power of data analytics, part of what we do at the Business Alliance is attracting retailers. And before we had access to data analytics, a lot of our retail attraction was done in an old style, meaning, relying on people contacts, and then also doing a soft pitch, meaning, come to New Orleans because this is a great city, we have culture and so on. And we realized that we were not being that effective. So we partner up with a company called Buxton, which is a commercial intel tool that helps us determine what retail brands are a good match to our area based on demographics and consumer behavior. So at this point, we do our retail attraction a little bit different. We create trade areas and specific sites that we want to support with additional retailers or services. And we get specific matches from brands that will fare well based on this information in our area. We get very comprehensive and detailed information like retail leakage and surplus analysis. That's a real estate jargon to state, what a specific area is missing or what it has a lot of. And the most, I think, valuable piece of information for businesses right now is that we also have the capability of geofencing establishments and understanding who their consumers are in terms of, their income potential, their household composition. Very interesting information like marketing preference. So we know if they have a high probability of preferring their marketing via text message, through emails, or through TV, and so on. And other interesting information, like, for instance, if they're interested, early adopters of technology, and that kind of information. And what's even more interesting, I think, is that we have the capability of understanding when and how often people are visiting stores. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that because we don't know how consumers are going to feel during COVID, monitoring their behavior is important. And a particular practical tool for businesses at this moment is that, just monitoring who their consumers are could mean a lot for their strategies and business plans moving forward. And again, as I mentioned, this is available for businesses. The only thing that I would need to get you a report would be your exact address, and that's it. We can geofence your area and provide a report with all this type of details that can ultimately help you understand who your consumers are. So a call to action would be, obviously, you're welcome to attend our events. As I said, I think that keeping a pulse of the industry and staying in touch with industry leaders is really important to understand how, navigate this environment. If you are interested in this type of data analytics, we are more than happy to provide reports with you. It's fairly easy to make. So we will be happy to support you in that. And then if you are interested in the fund, we're having an information session tomorrow. So we're happy to host you if you're interested in that. And then one final call to action would be that if you're interested in seeing what type of capital is available out there, there's a lot of organizations that reach out to us with available resources. One example is that, I just had a company reach out to me because they have new market tax credits available to allocate in the next 9 months. So if you are interested in exploring this opportunity, we are happy to make that connection. So with that, Myra, this is the end of my presentation.
And that's what you mentioned to your call to action speaks, to what we're trying to do here, collaborate, because we are going to get through this challenge together. We all need to work and build a stronger ecosystem so that we can help the businesses and through our different organizations provide those resources and tools that they need. So thank you very much, Alejandra. I have several questions that I've prepared for you, but first I'd like to pass the baton to Lynette, who I know has also prepared a very important presentation with more tools and more key advice for our small business owners. Lynette? Lynette, I see her.
I'm sorry, I was muted again, sorry. Oh wait, this is like, let's see. I didn't want it to be on a slideshow. Okay. Sorry. Okay, there we go. We're back to the front. So, yeah, so I want to talk to you guys today just a little bit about things that you should consider, if you're thinking about, how to make sure that you can keep your business sustainable. There are things that you might be thinking about, what else can I do in my business? How can I change? How can I, respond to some market needs? A lot has happened right now. There's so much uncertainty, as Alejandra, talked about earlier, that, we just don't know what's coming next, right? 2020 has been one hell of a year. And so, I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about, some of the considerations you should have in thinking about, how you continue to operate your business. So first off, I want to say that, we're in a crisis mode. Many businesses have had to shut down. I'm not sure, where everybody else, where everybody is here. But having to, I'm not sure how to stop this slideshow, how to make it stop. Okay. But anyway, just, thinking about, how you're going to make it through, right? Some of you have had to shut down. Some of you have had to, severely limit what you do. Many of you, if you had staff, you may have had to let them go. and you're sort of in this crisis mode of wondering, how do I continue to operate? How do I, at least continue to bring in the revenue that I was bringing in? And, if that's changed, how can I pivot? What can I do differently to, add to the streams of revenue that I have? What can I do to try to maintain my staff? And so, I know that people have had to make a lot of decisions, around their businesses. One of the things that we've done is we did a training series that was really focused on what are those things you should be thinking about now in your business. And I'll just say one of the things was it might even be time to think about closing your business, selling your business, right? But today I want to talk a little more about some of the things that you can do differently, based on where you are in your business. So the one thing, I will say that is that you just have to persevere, right? There's a lot of unknowns out there. There's a lot of things that are beyond your control, but, in your mind, you've just got to think that you've got to persevere through whatever, life throws at us, whatever this pandemic throws at you. You've got to find a way to persevere and maintain your business. So sometimes that will just take a minor iteration, right? That, whatever you're doing in your current business, be that a product or be that a service, that you may have to make some minor change in your business model and in your mode of operation, just to try and capitalize on, market opportunities that may be closely related to what you already do, right? But then other times you may have to completely pivot, right? You may have had to shut down your business when the city shut down. And then it's like, so what do I do now? How do I operate now? Which means it's a whole set of changes, right? You've got to look at, I've got to do something completely different than what I was doing to respond to some market needs to keep revenue coming into the business. But, whatever that may be, you just have to know that you've got to persevere and hang in there, know, that it'll get better, right? So if you're going to take this pivot, and everybody's been talking a lot about, pivoting and, doing something different in their business. So where do you pivot to, right? Kind of what's been said is, where there's mystery, you've got to think about, what's out there. There may be margins, there may be profitability for your business, right? So some of the things that you have to consider is, where are your customers feeling pain, right? What is the time, that whatever they need, what is that time frame like, right? And then what are their biggest challenges? Where are they willing to pay the most to solve those challenges and those pain points that they have, right? And then if you're going to respond to any of those needs, do you have the ability to first find the products, be able to deliver the services that will be required, to fill those needs. So almost at the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that hospitals were running short on PPE. And I think every business owner that I knew, including construction contractors, were calling me asking, so how do I get my hands on PPE so I can sell PPE to the hospitals, right, to healthcare institutions? Or, maybe I could do a cleaning service. I want to do a sanitation business. Everybody's going to need sanitizing in their offices. And, if I tell you that I had everybody from construction workers to, part-time teachers, coming to me saying, okay, I want to pivot, there's lots of money to be made out there, which is a good thing, that people weren't, sort of just stopping and just not knowing what to do. It said that they were thinking forward, on where they could go. Right? So the things that you have to consider is, what assets do you have, right? You've got people assets, or maybe you've had to lay off people. You may have had, a whole team of people. What kind of relationships do you have with your suppliers, right? Do you have access to your customers? How do you get to them? um, you know, what kind of capital constraints do you have, right? Do you have the funding to even do this, right? Because a lot of things that you might have tried to do would probably require some capital up front, right? And I don't know that the $1,200 that everybody got would have really been sufficient. But these are, you know, some of the considerations that you really have to make, you know, because if you're going to change, you know, you need to be able to ramp up supply. So you got to, you know, establish relationships with suppliers. You've got to figure out, how do I access these customers? You know, I'm going to sell something new, but these were not my typical customers. So how do I even get to these customers? How do I find out who even needs this, right? And then making sure that you can actually pay for it, right? To actually get it done. So when you think about it, so what are the assets that can you actually create within your business, right? So do you have a vision for where it is you can go with this? Is this something that you might be able to do for the long haul? Is this just sort of a temporary fix that, you know, that right now for the next 5 or 6 months, the hospitals are going to need PPE until they can catch up, you know, whatever it is you wanted to pivot to? Sort of think about it around, you know, what is the path forward in this? And is this something that I can sustain for a short period of time? Or is this something that I could look at, you know, over the long haul, right? And you probably thought about it in the back of a napkin, you know, well, maybe I could do this, you know, maybe, you know, PPE might cost this, and maybe I can mark it up by, you know, 20%, and, you know, would that be enough, right? But you've got to do a little more than that and make sure those numbers work. Because so often, you know, people either go into business, people switch what they're doing in their businesses without doing enough research, right? And so it might sound like a good idea. It might sound like you can make, you know, a lot of money off of it. But then, you know, there are other things that you just haven't considered, you know, and until you really consider what the real expenses are, you know, to do something different, it may not work in your favor, right? And then many times, you know, we might do all the planning for the short term, right? And never really think about over the long haul. Like, maybe this really is something I could do over the long haul. And maybe if I plan, you know, I could probably do a whole lot more, right? So that's why I put the Bill Gates quote here. Like, most people overestimate what they can do in a year and totally underestimate what they can do in 10 years, that we just don't look out that far. And, you know, we really should be. So if we look at some of the breakdowns, if we're talking about pivoting, if you have a product, right? Some of the things that you would have to consider, like, you know, what am I currently selling? And is that something I should stop selling? Like, maybe this isn't something that people need in the climate of COVID. What can I even add to the mix that might be relevant to, you know, market needs right now? And then how will these things impact my margins? So, you know, the biggest considerations, you know, that you have to really think about is, what will it cost me to do this, right? Can I do it by myself? Do I have to bring in, you know, more staff? You know, are there other implications? Are there certifications I have to sell certain products? Or, you know, and how long will it take me to even implement this, right? Because it may be that you're going to sell PPE, but how do you know how long it's going to take you to get it? You know, maybe you're going to have to order it from China. It might take 5 or 6 months to even get your order in. And by that time, you know, maybe the market is already saturated. So you've got to look at a lot of those different challenges that, you know, can really come into play. So just, you know, looking at how available are the supplies, right? Inventory requirements, you know, how much do I have to have on hand, and where the heck am I even going to store it? You know, do I have, you know, the facility to even store all of this? And then shipping concerns, you know, I have to worry about getting things shipped to me, but then I also have to make sure they get shipped out to you, right? And knowing what those costs are going to be, and then looking at those time frames, right? Because products are only worth anything to people if they get them when they need them, right? I mean, you've ever ordered something from someplace and it took too long, you got it after Christmas when it just didn't have the value for you. So, you have to look at like all of those different, all of those considerations that you have to think about. So just looking at the example of a PPE, if somebody, decided I'm going to sell this, where are you going to get it? How much is it going to cost? What kind of margins are you going to be able to have on it? What is it going to cost you, right? How available is this supply? And do I actually have a customer base to make sure I have a source who needs it, who will pay me for it? Do I need to move online? Do I have to, put it out on, a site that's already up, Etsy, eBay, or Amazon, or do I set up my own e-commerce platform on some of the larger ones like Shopify or WooCommerce? Or do I even just set up my own website, and do it that way? So there's just a lot of different considerations, and the biggest thing to think about is just your cost in doing so, and whether or not it makes sense for you to do it, that you really can make money at it, right? So if you've got a restaurant, and of course, all of our restaurants had to shut down. They had to come up with a different plan of operating, right? There were so many considerations. At one point you could only have this many. Now you might be able to have a few more, but there were so many things that were involved, for restaurants to even operate, that many of the restaurants that I worked with said it just doesn't even make sense to open, because I'm not going to be able to have the customer base that I have. I'm not going to be able to have enough revenue, to pay a staff to be here. And so many of them just decided we're just going to close, right? Until we could open at a time when, we could bring back at least 75% of our customers to have them inside our facility, right? But then some of the things that, some people did was they started to think outside of the box, right? Like, I'll just do a limited menu, for pickup, where people can just come in and pick up their food. And of course, to do that, you don't want to have 1,000 different things on your menu, right? You only want a finite number of things that's not going to cost you a whole lot. It's not going to take a whole lot to do. Some of those more popular items that, people would come to your restaurant for. There are some folks that did just some themed events. They had a parking lot at their restaurant, and they invited people to come in. We're going to show a movie tonight, bring the kids. It was kids' night. And then they were able to do, packaged dinners that they brought to people's cars, but it was a way, for them to be able to do something different, bring in some revenue, didn't require them to open the restaurant, didn't require a whole huge staff of people, but it was something that, they knew their customers would support, and pay for. And they were able to do that. And, if you can do anything that you'd be able to create some buzz around, get TV news coverage there, or, get people in the community talking about the experience, and creating experiences is really what people will pay for, right? People like to have something that's memorable. It's one thing just to come and pick up your food, but to sit in your car with your kids and have a nice meal and watch a good movie, that's kind of an experience, and people are willing to pay for things like that, right? So if we look at on the service side of a pivot breakdown, again, you'd look at what you're currently offering, right? And then which of those things are most profitable, which are least profitable, which can you afford not to do, right? And which is going to bring in the most money with the least amount of effort. To take the motto of my youngest son, it's like, what can he do to make the most money and do the least for it, right? So then you think about, what skills do you have? What skills does, anybody on your team have that you could offer that, the market would respond to? How long would it take you to assemble all of those services? How long does it take you to sell those services, right? So just, having something that the market might demand is one thing, but making sure that you can get to the people in the market who are demanding it is something altogether different, right? So it might sound like a great idea that, you could start offering PPE, but who the heck do you know in a hospital and, hospital supply or procurement that you could get to who would be willing to buy PPE from you, right? So, the marketing concerns are very, very real, and I would implore everybody, before you have this idea and you decide I'm going to implement it, make sure you know how you're going to reach the customers who need it, right? Because it's one thing to be able to do it. It's another thing to have somebody pay you to do it, right? And then you've got to, certainly consider what you will charge for it, to make sure that you're able to sustain what you're doing, that if you're going to, need people to help you to do it, be that existing employees, or you may have to, go out and get independent contractors, you've got to make sure that, you can cover the rate for them as well. And all of the ancillary services that, or expenses that may go along with that, like taxes and all of those things. So just another example, if you had a catering company, one of the things you could do here is, perhaps now that you can't go to somebody's home or to a specific location, so everything's shut down and, we have to be apart. It may be that you might decide to do online cooking demonstrations, right? That you've been doing all this catering and things were going well, and there's a few things on the menu that you do at almost every event that you cater because people love it and they think it's just great, recipe. So it may be now that people are stuck inside looking for something to do, that might be entertaining, that maybe you could take it online, do some cooking demonstrations to tell people how you make that great etouffee, so I'm not gonna say that it's just could decide to do something different. It's not gonna happen. You gotta, make sure there's that audience. Maybe that you have a good marketing plan. And, there may be opportunities for you to look at partnership opportunities with some other local organizations. If you're going to do a cooking demonstration, it could be an opportunity for you to partner with a winery or partner with a brewery, right? Because you got to drink while you eat, right? And then that says that maybe you've got another business that can actually share in the expenses. They'll share in the revenue, but they also share in the expenses as well. There may be corporate customers that you could book, who are trying to, while their teams are working from home and working remotely, it may be that they're trying to, bring in events or opportunities for their staff, to continue engaging with each other. And this may be an opportunity where you can engage corporate customers who have the money to pay for those types of events, that you would do, right? So the other thing is to consider is to make sure that you get, your market share. So if you're looking at what's actually available, in the market, you want to make sure that you get a percentage of that, and that it's a percentage that's worthy of the work you're going to have to do to obtain it, right? So it may be that part of the market share is where you're already operating, in your own geography, or you may decide, to increase your market share, you may want to expand where you're operating from. You may want to go to a completely different neighborhood. you know, another part of the city, or even another city, you know, if you wanted to go, you know, that far. But, you know, again, it requires a good marketing strategy because you've got to know where you're going, who's there to purchase what you're going to sell. You know, how do you reach them? You're going to have to, you know, put together a good strategy, getting email lists, you know, promotions, advertising to get people to come to your new website, to get people to come to your shop, you know, to increase the traffic, and just, you know, being able to connect with more people. That's actually more sales, right? It could be that, you know, word of mouth, you know, knowing where your prospects are coming from. And really, in any business, you really should be tracking those things, right? So that you know what's actually working, you know, because I've seen people who will spend a fortune on advertising, right? And then they haven't put a strategy in to track if that advertising is actually working, right? And that just really does not make sense. That doesn't, you know, do anything really for your bottom line. You've got to know if you're going to spend the money for marketing and advertising, you've got to know that it works, right? So while you put together a good strategy, make sure that you have a strategy on the back end to track, you know, what you're spending and to see that you're getting a good return, you know, on that marketing investment. But, you know, just knowing where your new prospects are coming from, be it word of mouth, you know, people coming to your website. You may just be in a good location with a nice, attractive sign that will lure people into your business establishment, or if you're just actually doing, you know, advertising. And, you know, I would say in the environment of COVID, you know, more people are doing things like flyers and brochures. And it may be that you could offer, you know, a referral program. So for people who are willing to refer people to your business, your existing customers, that you might be able to offer an incentive to them to refer more people, you know, and new customers to your business, right? So another thing is just looking at some of your competitors, you know, people who do the same thing that you do. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of business have had to close their doors. You know, 40% of small businesses nationwide have closed. And it could be that maybe you could, you know, certainly purchase, you know, a brand from a business that may have closed already, right? Because that business, you know, may have had a substantial book of business, but they've closed, but you're still open and you do the same thing. So if you bought a keyword, you know, based on their brand, as people are searching, maybe for them, they're going to find you, right? You can certainly, I think Alejandra talked about Google Analytics. You definitely want to do that because, again, you know, you want to know where your customers are coming from, so you know who to target, you know, more. You want to see, you know, what they're looking at on your website, how much time are they spending where, so you really know where to direct your efforts, you know, as to how you sell to those customers. Google has something called Keyword Planner. You have to pay for it. It's not super expensive, but it may actually be worth it. It's a service where they actually help you to develop those keywords to use in your search engine to make sure that people are able to find you, you know, based on what they're looking for. Right, and then again, we talked a little bit about expanding your geography. And it's a great way, you know, to get into a new market, you know, but there's also some risk involved in doing that as well. So, you know, lower risk ways to do that is to, you know, partner with another business. You know, if a business might not be using their space full time, they might allow you to use part of, you know, their facility at a specific time, like pop-up restaurants and things like that. Or, you know, a customer may have decided, you know, I'm going to just close up shop, or I'm not going to operate for the next 4 months until we open up the whole city. And that may be, you could assume somebody's lease to at least test the market in that area, right? So before you actually decide, I'm going to open this business and, put everything in it, this may be a way for you to come in and see if the market in that area, may be ripe for you to look at something longer term, right? And then higher risk would be opening in another city that you don't know a whole lot about, right? But I have seen people do it. And, certainly if there is one of your competitors that's closing, you might want to look at, this might be the time to acquire another business, right? And it may be that, you can get a bank loan and acquire a whole new business, which gives you a whole new book of business. Of course, you definitely have to consider, the historic revenue of that business, to make sure it wasn't a business where, their customer base had maybe almost diminished, right? Because you definitely don't want to do that. But if, in this environment where businesses are having to close because of COVID, and that's the only reason they're closing, but they still probably had a nice customer base, a substantial, customer history, then, that might be a thing to look at. And it may be that because of the environment we're in now, that you probably could purchase that business for far less than you could had, this COVID economy not been existing right now, right? Or it may be that, that business owner may be willing to allow you to do a payout over time, right? To do something every 6 months, give you some time to build up some revenue before, you have to make some payments, and just know that everything's negotiable. So, whatever works for you, try and negotiate, and see that you might be able to get things on your own terms, right? And in this environment, where people still have a lot of uncertainty, I think people are open to a lot of other options, right? But make sure that you do, marketing is, again, it's huge, and I see so often businesses will open because it's my passion, it's what I've always wanted to do, and I'm great at it and I'm going to do it. And then they forget to really market the business, right? And the biggest thing is, if you don't have anybody to sell what you do or sell, what you're selling, sell to what you're selling, you're going to have a hard way to go, right? So you've got to think of, making sure that you have a really good marketing strategy, right? Make it clear, why your customers are buying from you, what it is that you offer that's different from the competition, right? And hopefully that you've thought about that in your vision, in your mission, that you've got to have something that's unique from everybody else, right? Because otherwise people are going to go to who they normally go to, they're comfortable with. And to break into a new market, you've got to have some kind of differentiator, right? But, use a mix of social media and your website. Build your email list, and that's hugely important now because I think everybody is online now. It's hard to try to find customers because we're all indoors, and most of us, if you're like me, you're scared to even come out, right? So you've got to build those email lists. There are lists for sale that you can get on Dun & Bradstreet. You could join the chambers. I'm sure Myra can tell you that, and maybe share, other businesses that are in the chamber, member businesses. Yeah, but you definitely want to do that. You have to ask your customers if it's okay to add them to your email list so that, you could market to them. And then, referral programs are actually pretty good because usually you can give a very small incentive. It could be a 10% discount, right? $10 off your next purchase. But if they bring you another customer who could be a long-term customer, that might be worth doing, right? So I guess, the bottom line, look at surveying your customers. If you can do that in person, fine. But it's kind of hard right now. But, personal contact could mean a whole lot more to a customer rather than just sending them an email that they may or may not read. I know you all know how much junk we get in our inboxes, right? Just finding out what their real needs are, upstream or downstream, because it may be that what you're offering them that they buy from you, there may be something they need before they get to that, or there may be something they need after your product, right? And knowing what that is, that may be something else that you could use, you know, to pivot into, right? That may be some other product or service that you can add to your existing services, right? But just kind of finding out again, you know, what their pain points are, you know, what how you can help to fill whatever needs they might have, right? And, you know, just ask, how can you be a partner to them? That, you know, they've been your customer and you want to be able to, you know, service their needs, and, you know, to find out what things, you know, they might have a need for that you could provide. So then, you know, looking at your customer base, the cheapest one is the one that you already have. So I'm going to say customer service is king. You have to make sure that you're servicing your customers, and, you know, to keep them. You know, there is a cost. There is a cost for generating a new customer, and it's usually a relatively high cost. So as much as you can, once you generate that customer and you've, you know, expended, you know, whatever resources and expenses you had to get them, you want to make sure you keep them, right? And a happy customer is your best customer, because they're going to be a repeat customer, and that's who you want to have, right? So, you know, you might want to just consider who have the largest 10 customers, who, you know, was that over the past 6 or, you know, 8, 9 months, right? What do they have in common? You know, when you're looking at why are they here, you know, what do they have in common? So that means those are things that you should be considering as offerings for new customers, to make them, you know, some of your larger customers as well, right? What are their differences? You know, just make sure that you're surveying them to make sure that you're aware of what their needs are and how you can, you know, provide better and more services to them, right? And mainly, what else can you sell to them, right? You want to get more of their dollars. It's like we used to say in banking, what you want to get from your banking customers is their full relationship. You want everything. You want their savings account, their checking account, you know, their mortgage, their business loans, their children's savings. So, you know, just building that customer up so that, you know, whatever they need that you can provide, you want to make sure that you're the provider for them. So I think that's about it. And I would be happy to take some questions. Myra, you're muted.
I'm sorry. That was wonderful. I was saying, Lynette, they're being very shy in the chat, but I have a few questions. But before, you know, there were several things that resounded, you know, very loudly. And one was strategy. One was being open to your opportunities. And another one was that importance of the marketing and knowing who your customers are, where you want to go, the direction. It's a pivot, but you still have to have an idea of where you want to go, in what direction. The good news is the Hispanic Chamber is going to be offering a whole marketing series coming up later in November. But, you know, difficult times present business owners with opportunities to reassess their businesses. You know, a lot of times as a business owner, I'm guilty of that. I was a business owner. I procrastinated in making a decision of sustainability because I wanted to keep going, you know, with the business. But what are some examples of decisions that are propelled by a crisis, Lynette, that you would like to share?
Oh, well, first off, I'm going to say always look at your finances, right? And cash is usually king, you know, when it comes to things that you hadn't expected, like COVID, because you just don't know what the future is going to hold. And as much of your cash that you can hold on to, I think you should. And I think that's a good thing to even think about in your personal life, not just, you know, your business life. You have to really sort of consider, what staffing looks like. Nobody wants to have to lay off their staff, but usually that's your biggest cost in your business, is paying for your employees. And that's a big consideration, to make sure that either you can or you can't keep your staff, because that's usually the bulk of your expenses. And you've got to, make sure that you have a handle on what your budget is, and thinking about if you're going to do something different, just how you first off maintain what you have. And then if you can't do that, if you've got to, look at some alternative way of doing business, what resources you have to do that.
And as business owners always think, because when you say paying your employees, that includes,
yourself.
Exactly.
First and foremost, that's one of the first things I used to say when I did, teach entrepreneurial classes. That's one of the first things is you've got to pay yourself, right? And so often, business owners will open a business. They spend a ton of money, getting it open. And then, when the business is, to a place where they can pay themselves, they do. Not realizing that all of that money you invested in the business before you started to make a profit, you should consider that a loan to the business, and the business needs to pay you back, right? And people just don't think about that. When you think of selling your business, those are costs that most people don't even wrap up into, the valuation in your business. Those personal funds that you've invested in the business, and you've got to be able to get that out. You've got to consider that a loan to the business, and make sure that you find a way to pay yourself.
I totally agree. And this is for either one. Alejandra, please feel free to jump in too. What would you consider some of the most important areas of a retooling strategy, beginning with, finances, marketing, whatever areas you want to touch on?
Alejandra, you want to take that?
Well, I'm going to dig into what I shared previously and connected to one of Lynette's advice in terms of marketing and targeting your consumer. I don't know if this is the most important one, but I want to use the opportunity to just, drill in that example. I offer to businesses, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to geofence their establishments to identify who's going to the stores. A practical use for that is that not only can we know who they are, but where they're coming from. So, when we were analyzing this tool, we did an example of a local store and then, brainstorm of how we can support businesses. And it turns out, I don't know if it's true now, but a practical example would be like, you might think that your consumer is one, and it turns out, it's a completely different customer. So again, marketing is absolutely important. The good news is that there are tools out there free to the public at this moment that you can use to identify, who they are. So that would be, my thoughts on that. And I also wanted to make a comment around what Lynette, you asked Lynette about, in times of crisis, what do you do? And from a personal, also professional perspective, I think it's a great moment to just look at how you can be leaner and more effective. So I think a lot of us, even in our homes, are analyzing, well, what can I do to just operate leaner? How can I be more effective with my time? How can we be more effective with our programs? I think we're even, at the Hispanic Chamber, we're looking at ourselves and what are the programs that will bring us the most benefit and will bring the most benefit to our members. All of those that, are not being highly effective, let's just, either get rid of them or reevaluate if we really need them.
That's correct. And that brings me to another area, because there's a difference. What is the difference between the business guiding principles, implementing immediate changes because you're in the middle of the crisis? Mm-hmm. So it's an act now kind of situation, and then retooling, which is more of
what we're talking about.
Plan. Exactly. So that's what I wanted to. What would you consider some most important areas of to access capital? What would be your recommendation for those businesses right now looking for additional capital? Because it is an opportunity, but we know, and we've seen it with banks that right now may be a little hesitant with the loans because of but this is when businesses need help. So what would be advised for those businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Lynette dropped. She has a good amount of advice in that regard, but while she rejoins the meeting, she mentioned something during her presentation about when you're looking at your business, it might be a time to sell. We know that there's a lot of businesses that were highly successful before COVID, and it's unfortunate that because of our situation, they are strained for cash, and they can no longer sustain themselves. So this is a good time to look at yourself and see if this is your situation. And for that, the fund that I mentioned previously could be a good opportunity to analyze. I didn't mention the size. It's going to be we have to raise the capital, but we're targeting 25 million for New Orleans, and the total fund size is going to be of 100 million. So it's a good size fund. And again, the intention is to connect investors with already successful businesses, or they were successful prior to COVID, so they can gain additional cash. Again, I'll repeat, this is intended to be patient capital. So if you're a business, and like you said, banks right now are, it's difficult to get a loan, and maybe if you're already struggling because of COVID, a loan might not be your best bet. So I will encourage folks, if you're in the hospitality business and your business is a restaurant or a hotel or some sort of hospitality related business, consider this tool. We're going to have a presentation tomorrow at 2:30, and we can go over details. And Lynette just joined. So Lynette, Myra asked, and I think you're the perfect person to answer this, that in a time where banks are cherry picking their clients, and loans and capital is not as easily available for all businesses, what other sources of capital are out there for businesses to consider? You're on mute.
We have her?
We have, yeah,
Okay,
there we
gotcha
go.
now. Yeah,
Yes.
it wouldn't let me unmute. Okay. Yeah, so there are some alternative, sources. Community development financial institutions are a good source. And we have several of them here in New Orleans. There's Lift Fund and True Fund and New Corp. We have some community development credit unions, Hope Credit Union. I think it's One Path or On Path Credit Union, which used to be ASI. Liberty Bank is a CDFI. So mainly CDFIs get certified by the Jewish Treasury Department. And to get that certification, it allows them to raise capital, to raise loan capital. So what the Treasury Department does is that certification says that they are in business now to serve underserved businesses and communities. So where traditional banks, are not serving folks who can't go there, folks who are unbanked, folks in rural areas where there's not many traditional banks, then those CDFIs serve that purpose, right? So they're really in the business to absorb the risk that traditional banks won't. And so, most of them, they won't do, most of them are smaller, so they probably won't do, loans as large as banks, like $5 million loans. But for the most part, for small businesses, they actually are a huge resource where you could go in and, they will take the risk, into account. And many times, small businesses can use that sort of as a stepping stone, right? That you get in, you can get a smaller loan and then, maybe increase to a larger one. And, by the time you've established a good track record, you could move into some of those traditional banks, which I hate them. I call myself a recovering banker. I used to be a banker. But yeah, and there's like, certainly there are investors if you have, the type of business where, you may find an equity or an angel investor who may be willing to invest in your business. And more, we're seeing investors who are, reaching out to minority entrepreneurs. They're being a lot more diverse. We're finding more diverse investors, who are willing to invest in our businesses. So, that's certainly an option. There's some other resources that sometimes I would only implore you to do if you were just completely desperate. There are like some institutions called factoring institutions. And so if you got a large contract, right, say with the city or a larger business, and the only other way you had to finance it was to have them take a piece of the contract, right? So what happens is they'll give you the money up front, but they'll charge you like 10% of your contract value in order to do that. And then what happens is the contract gets assigned over to that organization. So I would tell you, if you're going to do that, only do it once, because it is very expensive. But if it's the only way to get funding for your business, it might be something you'd consider, but it's a very expensive alternative.
And you mentioned something very important, Annette, which is, even though we're going through this COVID, if there's a silver lining we can mention, it is the fact that minority small businesses are being really elevated and lifted,
Absolutely.
and there are many other opportunities, the focus from granting institutions that have funding for these, specifically for these businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's time to really investigate and know what's out there to see if there's something that fits with your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of small, capital funds. Sometimes you just have to search for, small capital funds. And there's even a few of them here, and they'll do smaller dollar loans. Again, they're risk-based. So you're going to pay a little more to get that kind of funding. But, if you're just starting out, or, if you're just at a point where, you can't get the capital anywhere else, let's say it's still, another resource.
We're almost coming to the conclusion, but I have one more question because I don't see any in the chat. So everybody's listening. I know they're there, but what are, and it's a great leeway what we just discussed. What are some of the trends that you recommend for business owners, maybe looking to pivot or thinking about it? What are some of the trends that they should be really watching and following to help them make those decisions?
I would say, as far as like the things that you may trend into, that you may pivot into, I would say just think about convenience. Because right now people are looking for convenience and they're more than willing to pay for it. So any types of services that, will help people to ease in this transition, I have one client, they developed an app. It's a delivery app, but they're doing beyond, food delivery. They're doing anything that you sell. They're helping you to get customers who buy it and then, either come by and pick it up. They can pre-order, or it can actually be delivered as well. And they're focusing on the smaller businesses. So for those big delivery service apps that charge a fortune to the businesses to do that and the consumers, they're offering a much discounted alternative, right? And so I've been working with them a lot now. They've, already amassed a few local restaurants. I just, spoke with someone at Downtown Development District and got a list of downtown businesses because, those are the types of businesses that need that. But I would say, think about convenience. Surprisingly, the real estate market has been big. It's been booming. So anything you can do around real estate, you know, for people who are either looking for real estate or people looking to sell their homes. Because a lot of people are just still afraid to do a lot of stuff in person. So just think of anything that you can do around, you know, stuff that people now are barred from doing. People are afraid to go out and do, you know, and if it's convenient, if it creates an experience for someone, you can do that. There was someone in my neighborhood that they did these packages. It's like a whole family pack. It was a dinner, it was popcorn, it was drinks, it was all of that for a movie night for you and your family in the backyard. And so they asked everybody to go in the backyard, have a movie night with your kids, and they did a whole box of, you know, custom, you know, burgers and drinks for the kids. They had little toys in there for the kids. So it was actually really cute. Yeah, but just think of anything that, you know, will create an experience for people inside their homes, anything that's going to lead to convenience. I'm seeing a lot of teachers who are forming teaching groups now that people can't bring their kids to school. So they're bringing in, you know, one teacher who, you know, has cordoned off a place in their home, and they bring in like 3 or 4 kids from the neighborhood, and they all chip in. And now they have a private tutor for their kids. So just think of those things that add, you know, convenience to people's lives, because right now, you know, we're kind of stuck inside. There's just not a whole lot that, you know, that we can do outside of that.
Absolutely. Everything in the area of, you know, you're mentioning how we're living in a digital world. And so anything in that area of digitalization and, you know, making sure your operation includes those digital or technology upgrades is going to also help you, you know, scale and, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Lynette. I think that creating experiences, making it easier for families, and the multi-channel, which again is the jargon in real estate. I think going back to your question of what are the trends that we're observing, particularly in retail, we had seen that the multi-channel, meaning, you know, the retail store, the physical store, and the online presence was a trend. By COVID, it was completely accelerated. So to give you an example, beauty Ulta stores, I mean, it's an exaggeration to say 100%, but near 100% of their sales were occurring online. So, you know, the digital world absolutely is gaining ground right now. I don't think it's going to be, you know, everything is going to turn online, but most definitely because of the convenience factor that Lynette mentioned, that is definitely something that's going to continue to be strong.
Yeah, but
and as far as watching trends, I really recommend looking at national organizations in real estate. The Urban Land Institute is a great resource. They publish articles of what's going on and around the nation. So you can get ideas of what other businesses are doing to pivot or, you know, catering to those trends. ICSE is another great organization, and they will publish webinars, or they will publish articles that could give you a good sense of what's going on in different markets. And that's for real estate, but every industry has their professional organizations that are publishing trends and what people are doing.
All professional organizations. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has, you know, great collaborations and across the nation with even other chamber leaders, you know, the Black African American Chamber, the Asian Chamber, the Pan Asian Chamber. So we're all in one group and trying to bring all of that knowledge from the national level down to our local chambers. So
even international. I was going to say that one of the advantages, and I'm going to quote, you know, advantages of this situation is that the entire world is going through the same thing.
Yeah,
so there's creativity everywhere, and we can take examples from all over the world on how to, you know, adapt their businesses.
Yeah,
absolutely. Any final words, ladies? I know, you know, thank you so much again on behalf of the board and our membership for, you know, taking some time today to share your knowledge and just weigh in this important topic, and we continue, next month with our next boot camp. But any final words for us today?
Well, I think there was a question about what were some good corporate gifts. Wow. I mean, I think anything that people are like hand making or just, oh.
Hand sanitizers.
Okay, yeah. And just, things that people make, with their hands, I think are, things that people really, really appreciate. Christmas ornaments, mementos that will remind you of this terrible, awful year that we've had, right? And, stuff, that just sort of, make people feel better about what has happened. But I think just, kind of handmade items are really good. So if you can find, especially local, local artists, culture workers, who, make personalized things that are, exclusive to like New Orleans and the things that, that we like. Yeah, I think, some of those things, and then you get to help, some of the local artisans. So I would say, just sort of, find some of the organizations that support the artists and culture workers. I was thinking that the Arts Council, there's Ashe Cultural Arts Center, and just maybe check in with some of those centers who could, point you to some artists for some really nice handmade or handcrafted gifts would be nice.
I think, yeah, I would like to add, people like to receive, something that they feel, it's personal. It's, people thought about it, not just a cookie cutter that everybody gets. So
Yeah.
Not the usual bottle of wine, something a little more maybe original, or, that is elusive to New Orleans, Louisiana. People like those kind of, and of course the Saints.
Yeah, well, I still like the bottle of wine, Myra, but there's like personalized labels that you can put on the wine now, right? People keep them for souvenirs.
Yes, absolutely. So wonderful. Well, again, on behalf of the Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, thank you. We'll continue our conversation. There is a lot to be done. We know we have our work cut out for the next, 18 months at least, making sure we're providing the right assistance to our business owners, and technical assistance or education tools, resources. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll definitely help you connect. And hopefully we'll see everyone on November 18th for our Recover Bootcamp.
Thank you, Myra. And I would just say, like, it's a very hard time, but, we have to keep going, and we have to do everything that we can to stay afloat. Not only stay afloat,
and support each other. Support women.
And support each other.
Support women, support minorities,
That's right.
Support business, particularly small and diverse business owners. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending and investing in your businesses, which is very important.
Thank you, Myra.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.